Well, we're here at the end of the formal program part of the day, and we wanted something, to end our time collectively in this room together today, something uplifting, something, something that would help us see again the better angels and the rest of humanity. And so I want to welcome to our session on labor unrest, deficits, population decline, war, the collapse of the meridional Atlantic, overturning current system, the weakening of the strong force, and what those mean for higher education and what higher education in California might do to help combat that. And so we've assembled a very, it's my kind of panel. These are boxers, and so you can expect a lot of insights, a lot of wisdom, and a lot of sparks, and absolutely no filter from this next panel. And their topic is perfect storms, what higher education leaders think about societal forces at play. So I want to invite the panel up and introduce them. First is Elizabeth Gonzalez, who is the Chief Program and Strategy Officer for the College Futures Foundation. She'll be our moderator. Michael Crow, the internationally esteemed and recognized and partly esteemed president at Arizona State University. I'm in the esteemed category for him. Sonya Christian, the chancellor of the California Community Colleges, and if you were here 2 years ago, she really got this panel going like crazy then. Kim Wilcox, the chancellor at the University of California, Riverside, and Julio Lopez, who's a trustee and the chair of the Budget and Finance Committee for the trustees of the California State University. Get ready for a knockdown, drag out, really exciting close to our time in this room today. Welcome to the panel.
That song, raise your hand. What year was that? What was that? Well, buenas tardes, Elizabeth Gonzalez. As I was just introduced, I'm the Chief Program and Strategy Officer at the College Futures Foundation. But what I also wanted to say was that I was there at that panel a few years ago, and there were a couple things I took away, which was it was respectful, there was disagreement, and you pushed the conversation, Sonya. And you made us think differently. So that is partly why I said yes when Lark and her team at the lab asked me to do this, because the second thing I wanted to say about that panel and this, convening writ large is we're all in education. I come at it from a philanthropy standpoint. We have a chancellor here, we have a president here, our different systems, different institutions, different states, but we actually aren't in the same room all of the time together, having this conversation. So what I hope you also hear in this highly disruptive, please lower the bar, Christopher, with this conversation is really a chance for us to have a really fulsome conversation about higher education, not from the inside, but from the outside. What are the things that are happening outside of our walls that are impacting what we're trying to do for learners, for students, and for our institutions? So I am thrilled to be here. So I wanted to say thank you to each of you for doing that. So with that in mind, I want to kick us off and just to say there are many, many years represented on this panel. And so, I wanted to start asking each one of you, what is different about this moment we're in? What's your take about this moment that higher education is in? What's different than what you've experienced, observed over the decades in your careers and in your relationship to higher education? Sonya, I wanted to start with you. What's different?
All right, well, good afternoon. So Christopher set it up with, talking about 2 years ago and being completely unfiltered. That was when I was chancellor of the current community college district, and I'm the chancellor of the California community colleges. So it's a different me you see here. So what's different? I started as a math faculty, came to this country as a graduate student in 1991, so 30 years. And I remember when we did the first online course, and I remember in technology, talk about technology revolution, I remember teaching calculus online, and I remember trying to figure out the different signs, the math signs, and how to do it. Does anyone remember equation editor? Do you remember? Okay, well. And then just a few weeks ago, I was using ChatGPT and asked for a solution to taking the derivative of a polynomial. And here we go, the answer plus the rule plus all of the steps to get to the answer. Talk about a point in time when everyone's rethinking, what do you do in higher education? Talk about our student demographics. It's changed a lot in the last 30 years. When you look at the California community colleges, we serve a diversity of students that is tremendous and wonderful. And we serve a lot more part-time students, and we're also reaching out to low-income Californians, trying to take college to them. When you look at the partnerships in industry, the whole idea of skills-based hiring is something that we are engaging with right now, alternative forms of education, that we didn't have to compete as much 30 years ago. You know, apprenticeship was apprenticeship, and then you had college education. Now we're being called on by industry to be thinking about industry credentials and colleges and make meaning of all this in the same ecosystem. So I would say it is a fantastic time to be in higher education in 2024.
Thank you, Sonya. I'm going to turn it over to you, Kim.
Well, I agree with Sonya. It's a tremendous time to be in higher education. Kind of the big issues right now, I think, are the political polarization and divisiveness that's evident. And I don't have to go through all that and how it plays out in society. But for us in higher education, we've exposed our vulnerabilities. There are things about our culture that we love. Mm-hmm. The openness that we have, the tolerance that we have. When students demonstrate on campus, we say, well, they're just practicing demonstrations. So we're always loose around the edges about enforcement of policies and the rest. And that's being exploited right now. That culture that we hold so dear allows us to be at the kind of the ball in the field being kicked. Yeah. Because it's easy enough to figure out how to get students positioned in a university to do things for whatever cause it might be. Most everything we do you could criticize because of how we tend to operate within the academy. And those things are challenging for us. They're challenging for us day to day, but I think they put us at risk longer term in terms of how we are portrayed in society. I don't think there's anything wrong with it, but I think we need to be more thoughtful about how we manage our own perceptions, or how we are perceived rather, because we've positioned ourselves to be taken advantage of.
We're going to pull on that thread in a couple of minutes, but I want to make sure to round us out here about what's different. Michael, I'll turn to you.
Yeah, I don't know that we're at this unbelievable moment in history. People think that we're in this all grown-up country and that everything's all done. We're a baby. We're a fledgling democracy struggling still to reach the ideals that were established by the flawed individuals that helped design where we were going. None of them were perfect. The aspirations were fantastic. And what that has meant then for higher education is that the chickens have come home to roost. It's like, oh, the democracy means everybody gets a pathway to education. Oh, never had that before. They didn't even admit women to Yale until the 1970s. I mean, you're kidding me? And so now we have this unbelievable aspiration where working class families say, well, I want my kids to have a pathway to college, and they're very, very irritated with us because they think maybe that's not possible. It's too expensive, or nobody graduates, or you get debt and then you can't pay it back. And so what we have right now is an opportunity to step up, and this will sound funny, but to be more American and less British. Our higher education system still prizes those things that came from Britain, which is exclusion and selectivity, as opposed to finding a way to be more egalitarian, finding a way where everybody can be involved, the communities can be involved, the universities can serve the communities, the colleges can serve the communities. And so where we are right now is we're at one of these great moments in American history where it's time to put up or shut up. You know, it's time to change the model which is no longer effectively working. That is the model that we think of as higher education writ large. There's lots of institutions that are working. There's lots of individual valiant efforts. There's lots of successes. I'm not suggesting that there isn't. But there's nothing at the level that we need it to be at to be the country that we're aspiring to be. Half the people that go to college in the United States that are alive, still alive, have no diploma. 3/4 of the people with debt have no diploma. That's a failure. We have to accept the failure that the democratization of higher education, the moving of higher education into the broader set of learners that is out there, hasn't worked. And in my own view, it hasn't worked because we're too rigid, we're too structured, we're too bureaucratic, we're too slow by every measure imaginable. The economy, technology, social transformation, communication, all moves at light speed, and we're still in Star Trek parlance on impulse power. And so to me, the opportunity is we have the license, we have the transformative energy, we have these things that are going on, and it's up to us in the kinds of institutions that we're a part of to really rise to the occasion. And there is nothing about the model that the university is just for the faculty that's going to work anymore. One of the things that we've done at ASU, to be clear, is that we've transformed ourselves from a faculty-centric institution to a student-centric institution. Once we got faculty acceptance of that, which doesn't mean 100%, but close enough, everything began to change. And so what I'm saying is that we're at that moment now, but I'll also say that the torches and the tar and the feathers are being prepared for us. That is higher education, because the level of anger about underachievement of our system, I hawked my house, sent my kid to college, and he flunked out. Really? I couldn't get my kid into college. My kid went to the community college and didn't finish. We got to fix that. And now's the moment.
Sorry, I'm sorry. I know I just don't want to lose track of Michael's first point, this immaturity of our democracy. The Roman Empire was 1,500 years. We talk about the rise and fall of the Roman Empire. We're barely rising. We have a lot of future ahead of us, and that's where my head is about the world today.
Yeah, and our institutional class will be one of the factors determining the outcome.
Yeah. Whether we get to be 500 years before we collapse like Rome, or 1,500.
Well, we'll know in November, won't we?
I know you're getting ahead, but who? Don't worry, the election conversation question will be had. But Hule, I want you to round us out here, because I think it's interesting where you said, right, you're not head of an institution, but you've been around it. You know, whether it was philanthropy, you know, working in state government, and now you're a trustee. So, you know, round this out with your take on this, where higher ed is at. What's different, what's not?
You know, I can get really excited about the moment, and I can get really depressed, right? I mean, that's kind of the tone of both sides. I think what is really exciting, and I'm talking now about my experience in California. I'm gonna localize it, because that's what I know best. I think California has a lot to be proud of. If you look at the whole access, if you look at, you know, what we've done in terms of really opening higher education to just everybody in California, and I'm not just across the board. I look at the CSU, which is the institution I know best, and I look at the access that people have, the affordability, you know, social mobility, which is now the latest whatever, you know, of our graduate, is just incredible. And at the same time, we have an institution right at a crossroads. If we don't change, because of what we're facing right now in terms of the demographics, in terms of how students are coming to us, and by that I mean, it's not whether they're prepared or not, is that they learn differently, is that the way they approach their education, what their responsibilities are, and we see this across the board. You know, we have to change as an institution. I think what's changed since I've gotten into this, which has only been over the last 15 years, has really been a change from access to now results and completion. You know, to being accountable for that completion. And I think CSU's done a really good job over the last 10 years of increasing completion. But now the conversation is not just about completion, it really is about also equity and the gaps. And that's really where I think the challenge is. And there's a big gap in the gender gap that we don't talk about. We talk about racial and ethnic gap, but not gender gap. And we see that growing as well. In some ways, the challenge now, and I'll come back to the political frame now, is how do we go about, if we know what we need to do to change, which is what I hear from this convening, how do we do it? Because fiscally, Christopher is right, we don't have a fiscal crisis, we have a budget crisis. But for California public higher institutions, it's really literally the lack of, in a sense, predictability in how we go about doing, or the ability to really take where we are and move it forward easily. We have a shared governance system that we are very involved with faculty, staff, students. We have unions. The process of change in California is very complicated, and that's, I know we'll get into that. But that is really, I think, what in the process of, at a time of crisis, how do we all come together around that? And that's what I don't know. That's what troubles me the most.
Before we go to this question of crisis and the society, other things, I want to pull on something that each one of you have talked about. It's, which is why we're here, the value proposition, right? Whether it's like it was successful, everybody wants an opportunity for it, but it's not. It's expensive. It's not flexible. What has happened to the value proposition of higher education? I mean, did we contribute to that? How do we bring it back? What should it be? Should it be different? Because a lot of us, I know at College Futures, we've been putting out data around the return on investment. It's not the perfect definition of value. We know there's more, but we started there because learners tell us, I want a better job. I know that's why I went first generation, poor. You want something better. And we relied on the data that says, if you get that, it'll be better. But there's more data coming out. Well, maybe not. And so I'm curious, what has happened to that value proposition, and how do we get it back, or do we need to be talking about something else?
I'll just say one thing that we've done. So we just broke $1 billion of research expenditures out of medical school, which is an important thing. But one of the reasons that we did it was so that we could get other institutions that believe that only their research prowess is important to shut up about us. And what I mean by that, and Kim knows what I'm talking about, it's like, well, you're no good unless you're an elite research university, because we've built a social hierarchy of institutions that is not appropriate anymore. What we need is a completely different classification system. We've worked hard to blow up the Carnegie classification system in every possible way. We're continuing to work hard to do that. Community colleges should be viewed as they're contributing to the social good, the economic welfare, the economic outcome. Colleges that don't do lots of research should be compared against each other, and we don't have that. So what that means, and this may escape some folks, we have a system in which the most significant institutions in the country right now cost $100,000 a year to go to. The line is 6 blocks around the street to get into a single seat, and we call that the idea of excellence. It is a form of excellence. It's a private institution honors college. And so the point that I'm saying is that in this scheme of even what you said, so workforce development, we're like all over it. We just increased the number of engineers that were graduating in the last 13 years from 900 to 7,200, well, with great diversification and all kinds of other things. But the second we start talking about work, the elite colleges who are based on selectivity and the fewer people that are admitted from those that are applied, well, isn't that good that you're working on work, because someone has to do that. You're not even a real university. I'm not kidding. And so it's a terrible, terrible thing, the nomenclature that we live in, the hierarchy that we live in. We've got to change that. And so we've got to figure out how to classify institutions by what their mission is, by what they're accomplishing, and then measure them against what they're ultimately working toward. And until we do that, even the utterance of workforce development at a R1 research university is not something you can talk about in an open way that will lead to anything other than derision.
Go ahead.
Please, Julia.
So So I think we need to stop comparing ourselves to each other.
Yeah.
I keep saying, we're not the UC, we're the CSU. You're not the CSU or the UC, you're the community colleges. And let's just figure out what we do well for ourselves.
And we're the weirdo.
Yeah, and you just sort of circle around us all the time, you know?
He aspires.
Yeah, he aspires to be. No, but you know, I would say this about if you look at the workforce side that some people turn their nose on, why is California the 4th or 5th largest economy in the world? It is because we have powered that economy.
Totally.
It's been the higher ed system. It's the public institutions in this state. We are the source of the work. We're the engineers, the teachers, the business leaders,
Agricultural.
the legislators. Look at how many CSU legislators are CSU alums. Community college trustees. I mean, we are the engine of the 4th or 5th largest economy. So I understand that there's a classification and there's a system, but as an outsider and as a public, when you talk to me about the value of public education, it's not that's not what people are talking about. What people are talking about is sent my kid to college, got into debt, took a second mortgage, and now he's working at Starbucks or she's working at Starbucks. And that's another thing that we ought to start thinking about differently. If Starbucks is paying $25 an hour, what's wrong with somebody working at a lot of people make their living at Starbucks. Let's stop comparing ourselves in the I'm better than so-and-so.
So we've graduated 13,000 Starbucks employees and have 30,000 of them in our degree programs. And when we announced that program, not one editorial in the higher education press said it was a good idea. They all ridiculed it as something.
Kim, are you trying to get in there?
I got a couple things now. One, the Starbucks thing really kind of threw me off for a minute. Remember, we're a completely closed society. We decide who is in our group, what we want them to do, and how they should do it. Every single student got screened by us. We laid out a curriculum with the classes. Every course was reviewed by lots of people. If they fail, that's not their fault. That's our fault. We're the ones that said, this is right for you, you should come and do this, and here's how it works. We got to own this problem. And I think, Michael and I have spent a lot of time talking about these issues, I think too few of us on the campus own it. We have some deans in some offices that own it. We have some other people who own it. The public just assumes it. I mean, and why shouldn't they? You run a closed society, you should be able to control all the variables, and we do, but we don't do it very well. So I think the ownership is a crucial piece to this.
I would just add, CSU is mostly admits everybody, and of course you admit everybody.
Sonya.
So I think that owning it applies to everybody. It's not just that you're close society. I just want to say this. We own it as public institutions at least.
Well,
If we're
very
public
good.
institutions, we own it.
Yeah. The other point I'd like to make, though, is the national narrative is a bit upside down. It isn't that higher education has lost so much credibility. Institutions nationally have lost credibility. Among institutions, we're better respected than almost all of them. Better than public schools, better than organized religion. There's more respect for us than organized religion in this country. Or public schools or the medical system. We're a highly respected operation. It's just that society has less respect for all organizations. That's the challenge. And so it is about higher education, but it's also about society. Back to my earlier comments. It is the case that most parents still want their kids to go to college. Michael's exactly right. We don't treat them all very well when they get there, but they all still want to come to college. The value proposition is not as negative as some people want to portray, but again, we're an easy target by the press and easy target by others because of some of the things we do so poorly.
So I want to key off what you said in terms of, kind of joint ownership. So we can debate the value proposition. The reality is most people still think of higher education as being their ticket to economic mobility, right? And what do we do in California, right? We've got the UCs, we've got the CSUs and the community colleges, and then of course, we have adopted our ASU colleagues as well. But the community colleges, we serve 2 million. Let's talk about scale, right? So we serve 2 million. What about those that we're not serving? So I think we have an obligation to take on the responsibility for those who have not found their way to higher education. And we are in a time when you're talking about the value proposition of higher ed, in an age of AI, what does it look like? Does curriculum content, is that the value proposition? Or is the value proposition more about the learning environment that we create so that not just 30 students who are in our class, but 30,000 Californians have an opportunity to get those classes? What about every ADT student who completes an ADT? Should they have the ability to get that baccalaureate? Should we be able to work with our industry partners and solve these problems, right? And I think we are at a point in time that we have the technology capabilities, we have the research capabilities, so it is the joint ownership of taking it on. We cannot sit back and say that our solutions are going to be incremental. It's going to be 100 students here, it's going to be 200 students there. When there are millions, I mean, I see Sujin Jess, I mean, you put out a report, Sujin, California Competes, a few years ago that talked about the 6.8 million Californians that are stuck in low-income jobs and they don't have hope, right? And when you look at the demographics, this is highly a racialized population. Now, in Vision 2030 of the California Community Colleges, we've taken your problem and we're trying to figure out a solution. So when we're looking at how we can challenge ourselves, it's together, it's working collaboratively, and it's not this limiting mentality of looking at single-digit numbers of expansion and scalability. It is to say together we have the resources and we have an obligation to be able to get higher education as a viable pathway to all Californians.
Yes, and I can't help but think that we're being a little rosy here, though. Because I appreciate, Kim, it is a lot of media, but you know, we look at surveys and learners are telling us, this is expensive. I'm not sure when I'm gonna get out of, you know, from this. Enrollment is down, you know, declining births are part of that, but there is something happening about belief and what's happening there. So I wanted, I don't know if there's a question here. I just want to name that because I don't think it's that positive. I think there is, and it may be part of a larger sort of just a decreasing confidence in institutions. But then what is higher ed's opportunity here then? What is our responsibility then?
And just on the cost and so forth. So if you do the survey and you parse it, which we do, there's those that could come but don't come because they think it's expensive and they don't take advantage of the financial aid that they might have access to because their family won't fill out the FAFSA. We have many families like that. They won't do this, they won't do that. Then there's the majority that come to the universities and the community colleges and incur the cost but don't get anything out of it. And then if you survey those that do and do graduate, it's a completely different answer at that point. And so then the numbers swing dramatically positive. So to Kim's point and other points, it's our lack of performance. We design the entire system, we admit you to these programs, and then you flunk out by the millions. Something's wrong. There's no, in my view, the faculty in general, in the country in general, don't understand their social role and their social responsibility, the importance of what we do as a faculty to the broader society and its outcomes. And we think more narrowly. We think about, you know, just the subject or the course of the discipline. We don't think about, well, how many more people could we teach, or how many more people could we reach, or how many more people could we graduate? And so the cost is, in some ways, the cost. It's whether or not you have access to other ways. So we're working on a theme now. We have about 17,000 of our 85,000 students on campus who have jobs with us. We're hoping that we can grow that to 50,000. We're going to move to the point where you're going to be working and advancing your career at the same time that you're attending the university. And so we're thinking of whole new models. and it requires everyone to think differently. I think that's my most important point. We're not taking responsibility for the lack of outcomes that we're producing. We think it's someone else's responsibility. We think the legislature didn't give us enough money. We think this, we think this, we think that. That actually isn't the causal relationship.
And I'm always reticent to criticize the faculty. I was a faculty member. I didn't give a hoot about graduation rates. I didn't even know there was such a thing, because I had my work to do that contributed to the better good. I think there's a responsibility back to ownership. I have a responsibility as a chancellor to help the campus understand the collective value of us working together in ways. This notion of a closed system, the notion of if we have a responsibility to these students, to their families, and to the state to do things differently. The fact that individual faculty members don't get that is totally understandable to me. They've got their own work to do. They've got 1,000 things to do. So this is, and Michael's done this at ASU, we have to think differently about how we operate as an organization and start to change this reality of too many failures, but also change how we're perceived, because rightfully we're perceived from the outside as kind of this disorganized group of people doing stuff, and we really aren't.
So I find myself in a very strange position here, because I've never been a faculty member, and I've yet to meet a faculty person who doesn't care about the students at CSU. I mean, they really care, and they care about their success. In fact, sometimes they care too much in some ways. I think, I really believe and want to underscore what you're saying. There is an institutional responsibility, and that's what I try to do as a trustee, to really figure out how we bring about the change that we need to do to take the faculty and all the employees of good faith to do what we want them to do different. And Michael, I have to say, I don't know, I think California is very different than Arizona in that regard. I mean, the challenge and the politics of doing change here, we should talk about what it takes to do change here. But part of it is, in a sense, what we're talking about. We have got to get to a mindset that we have a responsibility to change the way these institutions operate for the future. And how do we begin that process? And that's what I think what we're trying to think about. We need to do that. The other thing about it is, this is the other thing about institutions, the incentives are all wrong, right?
I'm not sure yet.
Well,
Tell me more and I'll decide if I agree.
Say more.
well, I mean, you said it yourself. All you cared about was the research or the student that you were doing. It wasn't about the student. You know.
Well, it was about the student. My point was, I didn't understand the institutional notion of graduation rates. I just want my student to do well.
Well, that's right. But you know, what I find is that, what I find sometimes with faculty, that they care so much, they want to keep them in the institution longer. Right? And that's something that to me is really, I mean, we just work in different environments, right? They care so much, and they understand the population, and they just want to, they just need a little bit more time. They need more, you know, that kind. So we've got to have a way to talk about those things in an institutional change modality.
I would agree with what Julia said. I think the issues from this new position I'm in as Chancellor of the California Community Colleges, that I think our faculty, our counselors do a phenomenal job within our colleges. But when you look at it at a systems level, like our system of the community colleges, the CSUs and UCs, I think we can do a whole lot more. We are stuck and steeped in tradition. You know, we're right now moving a huge initiative in the community colleges called Credit for Prior Learning. Imagine this. You know, we can't anymore say, hey, we're academia. You know, you've done this learning happened as a welder and a construction worker, or you went away to the army and you've come back to the military. We cannot not recognize the learning that has happened outside the classroom. So when we're talking about, you know, changes at the systems level, those are the big levers that we've got to pull, right? That when these individuals come back into academia, we say, hey, what? From our academic currency of credit, which we're challenging the academic currency, but bear with me, if that is the currency we're using, then we've got to be able to recognize it outside the walls of academia. And if we're not able to do it, then I think that's a time when the public is going to say, hey, wait a minute, what is the value proposition? So those are the big kinds of levers, I think, if we collaborate, because from a community college perspective, our students transfer, right? So when we're moving something as big as recognizing through community college credit, hey, you're going to get credit for this particular course, we need to make sure that our partners in the universities accept those credits. So we've got to collectively have the will to take this on and start expanding how we define learning and what the currency of learning looks like when we exchange it even outside academia.
So I want to move us then back up to this question, because the example you give there is a new way, actually rethinking what is learning, where does it happen, where does it get recognized, and there's an opportunity with technology in that. So as we think about all of these, societal developments that are happening, whether it's AI, whether it's, this decreasing confidence in institutions, what is going to have the most impact on higher education? Is there something that we've missed? We've all sort of mentioned AI, we've talked about technology, demand, diversity.
What I would say is, for us, there's been 4 elements of the change that we have driven. The first is to build a unique charter for the institution, which if you're going to be a part of the institution, everybody signs up for, which is its social responsibility, not your academic responsibility, your social responsibility. So we have a charter that has 3 component parts: inclusion versus exclusion, the success of the student, research measured against public outcomes, and taking responsibility for the communities that we serve. Pretty much everybody at our institution, 41,000 employees, 6,000 faculty members, that's called our charter. It's a driver. It becomes a reason for being there. The second thing that we put in place is this notion of empowering the faculty to be something other than petty bureaucrats that argue over resources among and between the politics within the institution, and empower them to become architects of their academic design, which for us has meant 85 departments, schools, and colleges have gone away, 40 new ones have come on. All of those have performed better than the previous ones, so that's an empowerment of the faculty. The third is to accept innovation as a necessity. There's no way in a country approaching 350 million people, no way in a country approaching the speed of technological change and the speed of economic change to do anything only the way it was done before. It doesn't mean giving up the way that it was done before, but it means not any longer doing things only the way it was done before, so innovating. And the last thing is to embrace technology like there's no tomorrow. Now, to do that means changing some elements of the culture. So we have 2,000 artificial intelligence-based course developments underway right now, where faculty are working with specialists to build intelligent tutors for that course, not for the big hallucination generating artificial intelligence, chat GPT outcomes, but individual tutors. I was with one of these, I was in a class with one of these tutors the other day, an intelligent tutor, and I was asking it question after question after question after question in an advanced biology teaching environment. It was unbelievable. The level of learning, the speed of learning, and what we're seeing with our students who are engaging these things is that it's going to be a huge opening of an aperture of learning, where we're going to move away from you must learn this way and you must understand this way to we're going to help you to learn the way you learn, and we're going to give you every tool imaginable to do that. So with the application of those different things, including technology at the end, we have seen transformation beyond anything we ever could have imagined in terms of the ability for people to move forward and so forth and so on. So innovation and technology, the last 2 things that I mentioned, are essential.
I would ditto that, absolutely. And I see Jennifer Chase sitting over here, Dean for the College of Computing, Society, and Data Science. I mean, ASU is definitely a leader in this space. In the California community colleges, we just established a Center for Digital Transformation, Innovation, and Equity, and I see our team out here, Craig Hayward, Don Davis Ruggio, James Stott, and our Board of Governors member, Syrian Villavicencio. So in terms of AI, the community colleges, I'll make 2 comments and then punt it to my colleagues here. We're looking at administrative solutions. For example, we have a project with UC Berkeley on the administrative bureaucracy of courses and mapping and getting common course IDs, identification numbers for students to go from one community college to the next into our CSUs. So that whole piece of work, right? It is a piece of work. It's huge, and it takes years for faculty to engage with it, but we're really engaging with AI to fast track that work, and then the decision point faculty get to make. So that is just one example of advancing using technology. We also have a project with, I think, several hundred faculty that are experimenting with play labs. So they're creating their own AI tools for their classroom, similar to what Michael was saying with ASU. Hey, I see someone getting all excited there. So I do think, our faculty are going to be the leaders. Mobile technology, Alex. So I see our faculty, our jobs as presidents and, you were the president of the CSU trustees, right, Julia?
No.
Okay.
No.
So I think our job is to be able to
Active member.
to create the space for innovation, create the safe space for technology and innovation. And we're trying to do it. And the last thing I'll say is, the community colleges, we are very much connected to our community. So when we're looking at coming at solution, a design solution with an equity lens, having community college faculty at the heart of creating those technologies is going to be absolutely essential for those AI tools to be grounded in the equity agenda. Okay, I'm done.
See, I love all that, and I think I totally agree with all of that. And in my mind, I'm thinking, and when we start that process, we will immediately have to deal with the issues of how do we, what does it mean in terms of the unions? What does it mean in terms of, faculty? I mean, who are we laying off? I mean, how do you deal with that? I mean, I'm trying to think forward.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to, I look at the next 5 years, and even in a boom time for the CSU, I'll just speak for the CSU, we have been operating basically by the skin of our teeth and getting amazing results. I have to give it to them. But if you look at the long-term sustainability, financial sustainability of the CSU, without changing, something's going to give. It just cannot continue the way it's going over time, which means we have to decide how big we're going to be. We can grow ourselves. I mean, maybe we can become follow the ASU and grow and grow and grow and grow. But it's...
If you want.
Huh?
So you can if you want.
We're joking.
I know. The point is, at some point, there's going to be some real disruption within the system.
I just got two comments.
And-
If-
Yeah,
I'll wait
and
till
so
you're
how
finished.
do we, I'd like, I mean, that's the thing that keeps me up at night, if you're going to ask me about that.
So I'll just say on that, so relative to employment and outcomes, we haven't laid anybody off. I mean, we're not advancing technology to replace faculty. We're advancing technology to graduate more students. And it turns out that when you graduate more students, in fact, we need more faculty, we don't need fewer faculty, and we need more people working with the faculty. We need more people that can do things. And so the other thing that happens, and so we started calculating financially what were our losses from the non-graduates. Financially, what were our losses from people swirling back and forth between the community colleges and the university. And what we found was that if we could just become, more retentive, graduate people more quickly, have more throughput, graduate people that then would stay for a 4.1 master's degree, our finances also improved as a function of that. And so for us, it's been a net financial positive. I mean, it's been amazingly positive for us financially.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you that question. Then, that proposition,
okay.
growing.
I've always wanted to do this.
Demand.
I'm going to quote Plato. This is Plato thinking about a future where not just a few people will be literate, but all of society would be literate. His fear, men will cease to exercise memory because they will rely on that which is written, calling things to remembrance no longer from within themselves, but by means of external marks. He saw the written word as being a crisis and a change for all of us. I think AI is the same thing. It's not going to change the world. It'll make a difference, just like calculators did. I remember a time when you couldn't bring your calculator to class because it was unfair. Heaven forget a programmable calculator or your laptop computer.
You and I went to college with slide rules.
Exactly. AI is going to be the same thing in my prediction. It's not going to be a whole new world. It's going to be a part of a different world. And so when I look ahead at what the big things are, I think the big thing is kind of where we started earlier. This whole notion of how we operate and how we're perceived. I think we are on a positive trajectory in higher education. We are now better appreciated, not just for our research numbers, but we have some sense of student success, whatever that measure is, and all the rest. We're headed in a different direction, but we have a fundamental problem when we have universities that have tens of billions of dollars in an endowment for 4,000 students. That drives a lot of how we're perceived, it drives a lot of how we're measured, and it drives a lot of how we as organizations behave, because we shouldn't compare ourselves to them, I agree, Julia, but nonetheless, they're defining a lot of this space. And for us as organizations to move in a more value-driven direction, more student-centric, scholarly and excellence with it, is going to take a bit of pushing against what is increasingly a bigger and bigger enemy, I'll say enemy, in the form of those very elite universities with lots of money and not much to do.
I hope this is spurring questions for folks, because I want you all to line up, because we're going to be able to move into Q&A, but I do want to ask that last question, and I'm not going to ask the election question, even though I think we could all around what you think the impact is on higher education, because I want to make time for Q&A, but I do have that question. Julia, you started to answer it, which is, what is it that keeps you up at night? So rapid fire, I'll start with you, Sonya.
I just think, well, I'm a positive person, so I've kind of turned things around. But I think it's really the will of higher ed to commit to really do learning at scale and with equity. I mean, I anguish that, we think about in numbers that don't make sense, and I'm thinking about it from a California perspective. I do think, Kim, that AI is going to have a bigger impact than other big changes that have happened in our world, so I believe that. And so when I sit back and think about the 39 million Californians that need higher education for their daily life, for their daily transactions because of AI, when I think about the industry sectors that are being impacted by AI and climate change, and the phenomenal amount of work we have to do, we cannot be limiting in our thought process. And in that way, I think ASU has been, Julia had mentioned about growing. I think we have to increase the number of future learners. I don't think we have a choice but to open our doors wider and get the outcomes to be higher. So that's what keeps me up at night.
I think what keeps me up the most is we're all moving, things are moving at different speeds, and so social media, 24-hour news cycle, artificial intelligence, all these things are moving at, we'll just pick a speed, light speed. The universities and higher education is not. And that means then that the probability for substantial disconnects are accelerating. And it doesn't mean we have to move at light speed. It means we have to be able to be much more agile than we're able to be. I have this joke that this watch that my wife gave me like 20 plus years ago actually tells time based on the rotation of the Earth, not each second hand being a semester. It cannot be that we are constrained in a medieval model, and we are. We are constrained by a medieval model. We must figure out how to make some decisions quickly, some decisions carefully and deliberately. Some decisions may take years and years, but we haven't figured out how to differentiate that yet. And that means then that technology and its outcomes could run away from us here, genetic manipulation and this and this and this and this, and all these kinds of things. And so we haven't figured it out. I'll tell you a very quick story. There was a guy that came up to me a few years ago, right before COVID, and he saw me at this meeting of a foundation, and he said, Crow, he was one of the senior executives of Google. He says, I need to talk to you. We're going to have to come up with a tax on all the high-tech companies to pay all the people who won't be able to have jobs because they're all going to be replaced by autonomous vehicles and autonomous systems and learning systems and AI systems. He could see all of this. And I said, you're a bigger idiot than I thought you were. People need to work. They need to be creative. They need to advance. And he was operating under what I call the theory of deficit versus the theory of abundance. And so right now, we're not operating under a speed or a trajectory in higher education to keep this world from happening where many people will not have pathways to fulfillment in their life and jobs and so forth and so on. And we've got to pick up our speed dramatically.
Julia.
Well, I agree with Michael. I mean, the speed and it just drives me crazy. It just doesn't move. What keeps me up at night is also on the financial side, to be honest. I mean, obviously, I'm chair of the finance committee. That's the only thing.
Of the trustees.
Of the trustees, right. And in the big picture, what keeps me up at night is if you think about all of the problems that keep homelessness, housing, the environment, the demand, I'm talking just in California, the demands that come up all the time. We get the short end of the stick, whether there's lots of money, when there was a huge surplus, or when we end up being on the less receiving side of the country. At some point, speaking of the value of education, it really depends on whether or not, as public institutions, and I'm talking about public institutions, I'm not talking about the larger, well-endowed institutions, we will have to figure out how we make the case for the public resources to support our ambitions. That's really challenging.
Let me kind of wander through some of these. I don't disagree at all, Julia, with the realities of public higher education. But at the same time, we're richer and better positioned than most all of the entire world. 99.5% of the people in the world would love to be in our position, as challenging as it may seem. So when I think about our place, we have to think about our place not just in our state or in our country, but in our world. And we do have a huge opportunity, a huge responsibility there. I don't disagree. I'm also not one to usually complain about pace of change. I don't find that helpful generally. But I do think we have an organization, and not just within our universities, but across sectors, across states, and further, that doesn't help us. It doesn't help us have the right conversations, it doesn't help us in decision making, and I certainly believe it doesn't help us in how we're perceived. And so, but what keeps me up at night is really not much of that. What keeps me up at night are those individual students who couldn't get into UCR, or who came and failed, or are worried about paying for it. That's the most painful piece. And I think of those students who, again, are more privileged than most of the people in the entire world, and think about all their comrades in third world countries who didn't get a chance to go to high school. That's the thing that keeps me up at night.
Thank you. I think we do have time for a couple of questions here. There's a mic here.
No.
Public higher education. Can't afford a mic.
Okay, maybe it's on. Yeah, there it's on. So the question that I wanted to ask, I was going to make a joke about reading the syllabus, but what it says in the program about this panel is that it's about not the big grand scale disruptions that you talked about, but the everyday disruptions that we face from climate events, protests, labor actions. And Michael, I agree with you about the acceleration, but I will tell you, as someone who primarily does crisis response for my campus, that we can't accelerate because every time we try to accelerate, we hit a wall, and then we have to stop, and then we have to regroup, and then we accelerate. So we haven't had an uninterrupted quarter since the spring of 2019 at Santa Cruz. fire, flood, pandemic, protest, many power outages.
And that doesn't even go all the way back to Denise Denton and all the things that happened those years ago. So.
Yeah, but I'm not really, we didn't stop instruction.
Oh, you meant
Denise.
stopped instruction.
I'm
okay.
talking about things that stop instruction, stop research, stop, I mean, in the case of the fire, empty the campus. So how do you think as leaders about being these grand strategists that we all want to be while also facing the poly crisis?
That's a great question.
I'll just say we have a very complicated institution with unbelievable diversity, unbelievable complexity, and we've never stopped instruction for anything, ever, including demonstrations, including disruption. Why would we stop instruction in an entire institution? We wouldn't.
Well,
Then we would arrest them.
Yeah, just for
Go
me,
ahead, Kim.
For me, the cut line is safety. I agree with Michael. There's pretty much we can keep things running. We did that during the pandemic. I use the example all the time. If the big one hits and all our buildings fall down, the University of California, Riverside will still exist because it's the people, the students, the faculty, the staff. We'll find a place to teach classes and do what we need to do.
My point is that it is our responsibility to find a way for the institution to be functional. During COVID, we laid no one off, we furloughed no one, we reduced no one's salary, we didn't empty our residence halls, we kept everything going that we had going, and we found people that could do that and found ways to make that work, and it worked out. So we had to find a way to keep the institution going.
But Santa Cruz has, close enough, has had some is a unique situation with unique challenges. Safety is always huge, it seems to me. And it is the case that I don't think many of us have been as effective the last couple of years as we used to be, because half of our brain is devoted to something that's a distraction. And that's unfortunate for all of us. And again, it goes back to my earlier comments. Part of that was natural disasters, but part of it, we provided society with vulnerabilities that got exploited, in my humble opinion, by politicians and by others. And that's also very frustrating. I don't have an answer for your question, but it's frustrating.
Question over here.
Hi, Bandat Sami, Los Angeles Mission College. So we have 3 segments here, all competing for the same limited amount of resources. And sometimes the greater good of the society and students gets lost in there. And I'll give you an example. We have a shortage of nurses in this state. Cal States don't have the capacity to educate enough nurses. Yet UCs and Cal States lobbied to block the SB 839 to allow community colleges to give bachelor's degrees in nursing. So how do we get around that?
Let's see how the CSU and the community college want to answer that question.
Well, what I will say is that I think we have got to come together to solve problems. And there was a phrase that Michael used, and I said it in a different way. Michael talked about not having a deficit mindset, but really coming at problems with a mindset of abundance. And the language I used was we shouldn't be limiting in how we approach problems. And it is not a competition. There is so much of need out there. When you look at the Public Policy Institute of California, we need an additional 1.1 million baccalaureate degrees. And when you look at the trajectory of the UCs, the CSUs, and in fact, I looked at some of our transfers to ASU. I think we're about 1,000 that go to ASU. And now the community college baccalaureate. To me, it's very clear that there's so much work to be done that there is no need for us to be competing, because even if we go full throttle, even if we double what we need to be doing, we are still not going to be able to meet the need. And that is why we've got to come together. We've got to go to the governor and to the legislature, and we've got to put the plan forward of this, how it can happen. I believe that, the community college budget right now is about $18 billion, right? If we want to go from serving 2 million to 6 million, it doesn't mean that the state is going to give us 18 billion times 3. That's not going to happen. The only way to solve that problem is to lock arms with these individuals here and be able to sit down and figure out a solution. And fundamentally, I believe that if we take on this problem, the solution is not, it's a no-brainer. We can make it happen. We can utilize community colleges fully. We can utilize CSUs fully, the UCs, and invite our partners at ASU as well. So it is not a competition. It should not be a competition. It needs to be with an abundance mindset that we need to tackle these problems.
Yeah, and I would say that, you know, rather than getting into the specifics of the nursing veto and all the specifics, I want to agree with you, Sonya, that I think that there's a lot of ways in which we're like sometimes we act like a dysfunctional family, right? We're siblings that compete with each other, right? Rather than thinking about how we can collaborate. There's a lot of examples, for example, even in the nursing, you know, of 2+2 programs that are very, very successful and that work very well. There are other places that we need to figure out how we address shortages, but we don't have the, somehow because we're competing, or we see ourselves competing, rather than thinking about how we solve the problem together, we end up stumbling, literally, and getting into a situation where we end up exacerbating, or if you will, undermining each other's credibility in the legislature or with the larger public or whatever, when we don't need to do that.
And this is, I think, symbolic of my earlier comment about our organization.
Yeah.
In this case, across sectors. I don't think anyone would disagree if you backed up from this. We have billions of dollars and hundreds of thousands of people. We can train enough nurses, but we've got it parceled out in different places with different assumptions and expectations and limitations. Yeah. If we thought differently about this, and Michael's point, organize this differently and get out of where we have been in the past, there's plenty of resources to graduate all kinds of nurses.
I want to say thank you and
Question.
oh, I got the.
Is there a microphone, or should I just talk?
There's a question right over here.
There's actually.
Thank you. So I am from the University of California, Merced, and everything you said about access very much resonates with us. We're the institution which has majority of our students coming from underrepresented minority populations, majority of our students coming from first generation in college. So what happens though a lot in our practice is that we have the students who are coming in underprepared. We have, and this is not just URMs and first generations, I think in general, we all know that K through 12 is not exactly effectively preparing students for college. So we need to do a lot of reconnaissance, and we need to do a lot of kind of reteaching the stuff that they were supposed to be coming with from K through 12. And particularly, underrepresented minority and first generation students, we know, require more effort, more time, more resources to be able to graduate them. But we're constantly being told that, well, yes, let's accept everybody, but then let's also graduate them faster. And those are two contradictory goals. If we want to get, and we know that already, and then we're being told that, well, just use technology, it will be faster and better. But then we know during the pandemic, online education actually hurt the underrepresented minorities and first generation students the most in our context. So how do we resolve this constant pressure of doing things faster and for less money, and at the same time increasing access?
So I'll just say from our experience, which is we have an extremely diverse student body, 85,000 full immersion learners, all of whom are living in an environment with substantial technology enhancements from more than 500 technology tools that we've brought to bear, and then we have 110,000 online degree-seeking students also enhanced with technology and new ways of learning. I'll just give a couple of examples. I mean, we're graduating more Latino and Latina engineering students than we graduated in total engineering students 13 years ago. And so we do this by individualizing and personalizing learning through the use of technology. And we've been doing this for a very long time, and it has proven to be effective. The thing that you said about online being ineffective in minority communities during COVID, that was true when poorly deployed, unmanaged, unconnected to other things, but not true in many environments where it was more effectively deployed. And so it turns out that exactly what you're saying is, we have a similar mission to UC Merced. Exactly what you're saying, produce more people from a broader and more diverse background at a lower cost to the family, with a market valuation of their degree equal to UCLA or Stanford or University of Washington or University of Texas. We do that. And we do that by basically using technologies to enhance individual learner outcomes. And we have, by now, we graduated 38,000 people last year, so we have tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of proof points of that, of where that works. And so it requires a transformation of the culture of the faculty. And our faculty's culture has been transformed.
When you mentioned you were from UC Merced, I wanted to announce that on November 8th, on Friday, there's a transfer summit at UC Merced, and we're going to have all three systems, Michael Drake and Millie Garcia, and I are going to be there. So I wanted to do a shout out for that. What I would add from a community college perspective to your question, our faculty have been dealing with issues. For example, we had a law that was passed in remedial education reform that placed students directly into their freshman level English and math and had taken away those prerequisite courses. And it was a huge transformation that really flowed across all of the community colleges. And I just sat back in awe in learning from our faculty how they came up with ideas to do wraparound academic support in the time that they were immersed in that particular course. And there was a lot of fine tuning and lots of conversations that happened. But the issue of, coming in without maybe the particular academic skills and how do you accommodate for it in the work is something that I think is extremely a critical topic, and I'm so glad you raised it, that we need to engage in the faculty space and figure out solutions along with other institutional structures and resources that may need to be invested in it.
I think that's a great way to end, because that will always be what we're trying to do here, and it means doing things differently, seeing things differently, and thinking differently. So thank you so much for the conversation. I know we went over, Christopher, but here we are, so thank you.
Thanks so much to the panel. We've had a really rich day in this panel, and the first panel connect, and I'm not going to say anything funny for the next couple of minutes. The first panel and this panel connect in very important ways. Laura Hope and Michael talked about the value proposition of higher education, which is a theme all day long, and 2 years ago and tonight as well. It is an interesting way of thinking about ourselves, questioning the value proposition when we have people who can't afford it sleeping in their car on our campus, going to the food closet to try to find food. They are feeling a value proposition of the most extreme urgency. We often think about the value proposition of higher education in this simple term, which is our graduates earn this much more over their lifetime than a high school graduate. Well, what does that really mean? What are we really saying when we say that? I think about it a lot now. We're just raising the minimum wage for fast food workers, for healthcare workers, as we've already heard about Starbucks. So if, in the absence of any changes in our sector, our value proposition is about to go down. The gap between earnings for a high school diploma and our college degree, all else being equal, as society is finally reckoning with low wages in so much of our economy, our proposition, which is, look at us, aren't we great because everyone else is underpaid, is no longer the value proposition that it was. And we should interrogate ourselves as to why we have always said that is, rather than lifting up low-wage work and improving skills to make that better as well, we have derided people. Oh, it's too bad you got your degree and you're working at Starbucks as though you were a failure. So we have some questions about what our actual value proposition is, but it's powerful. It's extraordinarily powerful. And we know this for the reasons that Michael mentioned. It is about prestige. And it is why when I said in the morning at the outset of this session that a UCLA degree is the most powerful public intervention that the people of California have ever created for helping people skip a social class. I'm a former faculty member at Sac State. Sac State's not a close number 2. I'm a former community college vice chancellor. There's no community college, maybe Santa Monica, I don't know, that is in that ballpark. We think, because we know the power of a UCLA degree or a San Diego degree or a Davis degree, we think that it's the degree that we're granting as the public that is the value. And that all this concern about prestige, that's somebody else. But it is the fact in society, in the workforce, that prestige translates into your life chances, into your life expectancy, into your wealth and into your income. It is real. And so I want a question for us as we go to the bar and have our lightning talks and our drinks, and when we think about this overnight, is are the notion that and this was said actually many times today, I'm not the kind of person that compares one institution to another, or we should be that less. We should collaborate and get over the comparison. To me, it sounds just like I don't see color. Right? That if I can just ignore it, if I can just wish it away and live in my own world that is absent the severe social and economic stratification that higher education reinforces. But we don't want to admit, because we are educators, we are here for the individual students and their opportunity, but the system that we are engaged in has contributed massively to social stratification and into inequality. So what do we do about that? Well, the good news is that's what the rest of the day in between has been about. That the projects, the initiatives, the others that are about, how do we take this thing that's working at Berkeley for a couple thousand students and make it work for 100,000 statewide? How do we redesign grading? How do we do things at the system level that will mean that we're not talking about how do we, if we just change the environmental quality laws, maybe UCLA could serve an extra 8 students, wouldn't that be great? And instead, what do we do, what will be necessary in our institutions in the state in order to grant that sheepskin to a couple 100,000 more Californians or a couple million Californians, since we discovered or invented the most powerful social intervention known to the public sector in the creation of our university and college system. So I say this not as a downer, because I'm not down about it, I'm excited about it, but it isn't about it's not just about mindset change or narrative change or collaboration. It is about innovation and action and about scale. And that is why Learning Lab exists, in order to drive that at a scale that will dramatically transform that inequality and the strength of, so that California can continue to be the 5th largest economy, but be the 5th largest economy for the benefit of all. So we were talking, you know your audience, Michael Crow, giving or at least there are a lot of STEM folks here, maybe there are Star Trek folks too. And impulse power really hit me. I don't know why that hit hard, because that's not very fast. But we're listening too much to Scotty in engineering telling us that the engines cannot take it. And they always do. At no point did the enterprise, fail to engage warp power. We have to push forward. And so I want to salute the innovators that have spent the day with us sharing your projects and your ideas. We've got so much more to do with this tomorrow, because our work really matters. And it isn't going to happen in the election or in a labor negotiation. It will happen because we are proving that we can with individual projects and initiatives and steps forward, and then we are taking them to scale and challenging some of the structures that prevent that from happening.